Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight for the inaugural presentation, Mayor Bracey's very first Artisan of the Month, which is super exciting. And actually, one of the person who is one of the first Artisans of the Month, which is, will be up here in a moment, I actually consulted him and asked him, as well as I asked several other artists, like, who do you think would be really great ideas to represent the community and artists in the community? And as he's sitting there thinking, well, gosh, here's all these people that have helped, and here's these people that would have helped. And every single other person that I asked was like, well, he really should be it, because he does so much work and he's so amazing. So that was kind of how you came to be. So your community adores you, in case you don't know. But to now do the formal part. Our very first Artisan of the Month, representing absolute excellence in performance, in skill, and also representing the face of the artisan as a member of the community, as part of the economic development and growth of York as an arts and cultural destination, someone who represents the best of what we do here, someone who brings people to the city and who acts as an active and participatory ambassador for the wonderful things that our city is doing, and who contributes so much to making people excited about the art scene and the cultural scene here in York City. Our very first Artisan of the Month is graphic artist and photographer Daniel Walczyk. Yay, Daniel Walczyk! Now, a lot of people know Daniel because he is the co-owner of Volcania Graphics and Fine Arts, which is a wonderful storefront right in downtown York, and which puts on wonderful shows and showcases, and is an active participant in our First Friday program. But he is also the first vice president, and he does the website and a lot of the social media for York Art Association. He's a very integral part in that wonderful group of artists that does so much, not just with showcasing art, but also with doing classes and education, producing a new generation of artists. And he also is a member and one of the coordinators for one of their venues there, I believe the Rich Riley office, with the Gallery Group, which is a great program that York Art Association does, which brings art into non-traditional spaces, because it's not enough to just be in a gallery, you have to take it to the people. And the first place that most people in York will meet Dan is not in his gallery, not even in the York Art Association, it's out in the street, because at almost every art event, at every First Friday, at every downtown event, festival, and block party, Daniel is there photographing it, creating a record, putting it up on Facebook, putting it up on Instagram and Twitter, and people are sharing and resharing. So all on his own with his art, Daniel has been an absolute commercial ambassador for the entire downtown scene, showcasing us in our very best light and our very best post-Photoshop style. But he is not just a member of the community. He is a fabulously lauded and showcased exhibitor. And I love the fact that although he has been in his own gallery, he's also very active with supporting other venues and art galleries in York. Just in the last couple years, he's been in Jonal Gallery and Garth Gallery, both in Columbia. He's been at King's Courtyard Artist Collective and Hive and Parliament, the entire King Street emerging Royal Square neighborhoods. He's been in the York Art Association multiple shows and won numerous awards, including the first place professional category in the York Art Association's About Face open exhibit, and also received an award of excellence in the York Art Association's 41st annual open juried exhibit. And he is one of the featured artists in the Kinsley, yes, is it Kinsley? That is the Shipley Energy, just, not only bought just one piece, but took a look at it on Facebook, mind you, and ended up furnishing a large chunk of their new corporate headquarters with multiple pieces of Daniel's artwork, because they just fell in love with it. Not only the skill and the talent of it, the beautiful way it's produced and presented, and also the fact that he was such an active part of the York art scene. So in recognition and in absolute celebration of all of your contributions to York's art scene, in the work that you do outside of the community, bringing people here, showing off York, showing what we do, in recognition of how active you are in this community and how many people owe such a debt to you of excitement and adventure and being pushed outside of their boundaries of what traditional art means and how it can be a part of your life and how you can integrate it, in recognition of your community work and all of the assistance that you've given to other artists and other galleries seeking to gain a foothold in being a part of the downtown scene and helping it grow and become a destination that every single month new people are coming from Maryland, from Lancaster, from Harrisburg, from all over the place and loving what they're seeing here. The city of York is very honored and very proud to claim you as our very own and to present you with an award for Artisan of the Month. And there is no person better to recognize and to honor you with this than our very own head of all things, the boss lady herself. Please welcome to the podium to present this award, Mayor C. Kim Bracey.
She does this so well. Thank you so very much, Carla. There's absolutely nothing else for me to say. Nothing. She said it all. You were selected again by your peers even. That's truly an honor, and endorsed by me as the mayor. But I'm honored that you are our first of many to come. There are so many artists, as you know, in this community. And while it's just a wowing experience to know how Bill Shipley even connect downtown or you and your work as well, and said, hey, I want some of that. I'm glad of that, and congratulations. Come on up here, Daniel. You are our Artisan of the Month for July 2014. Congratulations, sir. Yes. Woo!
I know we can't even clap because we're all taking
I
pictures.
know, so everybody has a bit. There we go. Representative Schreiber is here with us. As you know, he's helped lead the way with our whole artist community as well. And I'm delighted to have an arts and cultural liaison now on board. We're going to see a lot of great things happening in the city of York, and your commitment, your continued community support. I see you, as you know, all the time as well too. We appreciate that, and you giving back and having a business in downtown York as well too. So thank you, congratulations. We are here for you as you continue through everything, and we appreciate you. Do you have something you would like to say?
Wow. I'm sure I can't be as eloquent as Carla was and poetic as she was at the town meeting last night, I'll try. I have to say, and I've commented already like this on Facebook, that I am just honestly, knowing the scope and breadth of the artistic talent that exists within the city and within York County itself, I'm enormously humbled by this and truly and deeply honored and touched that you've chosen me for that. And I thank Mayor Bracey and, can I call you ACL, Carla Christian? It's easier to say than Arts and Culture Liaison, but thank you very much. And one of my associates here from York Art Association, our past president now, Jamie McKnight, when we first joined York Art Association, was really sort of our first introduction to the art scene in York. We were still residents in Wrightsville, and we were joining all of the local art associations as a way to build business for Volcania as we shifted into a primarily art reproduction service for local artists. And York Art Association was by far the friendliest of the art associations in this immediate region, by hands down, and we knew we'd found a home there right off the bat. So that introduced us to what turns out to be the enormous sense of community and commitment in York among the arts community. I mean, it truly is a family and it's community, and They don't have that in Lancaster. They don't have that in that other Rose City that's across the river, like we have it here. And when we finally decided and knew we had to leave our burdensome property in Wrightsville, we started looking in Lancaster and York, and Lancaster was too expensive. And in the 3 years from when we first had seen a First Friday in York and it was kind of dead, to 2.5 or 3 years later when we came back, there was a huge and enormous change. And we said, what better time to go to York? York is where we need to be and where we York will always have an ambassador in me and my partner Sean in Volcania Graphics. We aren't going anywhere else. This is the place. The work I brought with me, I brought specifically because it is all York City related material. Some of them you might recognize, other ones are probably a little bit more manipulated than you might recognize. That one is the side entrance to Market View Arts. Sean calls it the Poirot piece because it does have kind of an Art Deco feel to it. But that's that glass face where the new elevator is in that building. And so that's in honor of Market View. And interestingly, I was just meeting with Ken Wessler and the other tenants at Market View since the Strand is taking over building management and building coordination. So I'm sure you're going to start seeing, and York Art Association now has a space down there as well. I think you're going to see that place make a huge turnaround in the months to come. This one is actually, it's called View from Mothership. And that was actually, and I wish, I've got to go back and check the public sculpture that is a detailed shot of that has then been reworked. The moon obviously wasn't part of it, but that's developed from a detailed shot of one of the public sculptures here in downtown York. Excalibur over here, just some rusty pipes along the building, and then of course the old courthouse building over there is shot through an alleyway. And I think all of this is very, very new work for me. I was primarily a wildlife photographer, nature photographer, floral, until we moved downtown. And we opened up in January of 2013. When spring rolled around, we said it's time to get out and get to know the neighborhood. And I started just taking pretty straightforward photographs of sites and public sculptures and all of those kinds of things, and then started experimenting with them. So to me, the pieces really speak not only of our business transformation and our rejuvenation through the move to York, but also echo what's going on in York with the art scene and with the business community, and how all of those things tie together. And we're all transforming together, and we're all rebuilding together. And so from the rusty, decaying, decrepit things come more beautiful things, and that's part of the cycle. Something has to die off for something new to come in and take over. So that's sort of where the aesthetic impetus comes to, and experimenting with all this city has to offer. So thank you again. I'm truly honored and deeply touched by this. So thank you.
Thank you. So Carla's crying, and I don't know if she was planning to come back up here, but I again am excited that we have the position that we have with her leading it, and what it's going to mean for our entire community. So thank you all for coming out this afternoon, and thank you, Carla, for your leadership in this way, and we look forward to next month. Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Dan Walczyk. My name on my business card appears as Daniel G. Walczyk, and in my personality disorder, I sign my work DG Walczyk. So there's a little bit of an identity crisis going on with different hats with the business and myself just as a plain person and not necessarily an artist, and then as an artist that's out exhibiting work. My most recent work is all about downtown York. Everything I've done recently is based on York subject matter, and all photographically based, and some is fairly straightforward photography, and the majority of it, there's 2 urban series I've been working on since we opened up shop in January of 2013. Yeah, 2013, I had to think back on that. Have been urban totems and urban musings. And what I do with these is take an image of something fairly commonplace, like an electrical meter or the railroad crossing mechanisms that bring the arms down, and I layer several copies or just a second copy of that same image, and then start manipulating and warping and torturing pixels to sort of re-envision something that's very commonplace, to bring out maybe its more spiritual personality or its deeper soul. Even inanimate things can sometimes have sort of an anthropomorphic feel or look to them, depending on how you're looking at them. So what I've been doing most recently is finding these hidden totems in very commonplace things like bridge abutments along the Cadorus and abandoned factory, or what appears to be abandoned factory facades, or older buildings, older architecture, and finding that spiritual totem that is within the man-made objects. Because I mean, at the base of it, even as with art, there's the human hand is in all of those things, whether it's architecture or street building or anything else. So those, for me, I think the inanimate objects then are infused with some sort of human spirit and spirit of the community and spirit of the city on a broader level than just the individual people that created them to begin with. So my whole thing recently has been a revisioning of York and some of its more commonplace, or what you might call mundane things. It's a huge family. I mean, we noticed that right away when we moved here, with people stopping by to welcome us to the city and welcome us to the neighborhood, and so it's a huge feeling of family and community that before we moved here, when we knew we needed to give up the place we were at in Wrightsville, we went back to Lancaster and we were looking at Lancaster, and we'd approached galleries in Lancaster in the past and had basically been turned away for what we felt was just the way we worked, the tools of what we did, and photography was not something, and certainly digital artwork was not something that Lancaster was particularly ready to embrace, or at least the established galleries were not. So we were turned away, and then the other part of it was that it was, because it's so established in Lancaster, it was going to be very expensive to try to establish ourselves there, and we didn't have the money and we didn't have the wherewithal to purchase a property, and so we came back to York for another First Friday, and over the course of 3 years, each visit, York's First Fridays were more and more active and more vibrant, and more places opening, and we saw more and more happening. So we felt that because of the sense of community and family and the welcoming spirit of not only the artistic community, but the rest of the retailers and just the general population walking down the street, you get hellos and how are yous that you don't get with necessarily in Lancaster, and so it was pretty obvious that York was the place to be. And they were very supportive of the type of work we did. There wasn't the concern with the fact that we aren't using traditional tools, and we aren't even doing necessarily traditional things with photography, or more traditional things with digital work. Even our digital paintings here at Volcania and digital manipulations aren't an attempt to reproduce something to make it look like traditional artwork. for me and for both of us here, Sean and I, in the end, it's about the visual art and the object that you create, the finished piece printed up on the wall and available for people to view and enjoy and hopefully purchase. It's about that finished product and that vision and that the sense of spirit in the piece or the message in the piece is the point. It isn't about the tools you use to get to that. For us, it should be about what's there for people to take in and for people to view and interpret as they will. There's talk that, well, if your audience isn't getting what you meant, then it's not a successful piece of artwork. And I don't really concern myself with that. I know what I meant, but it's highly unlikely that anybody else is going to get exactly that same thing from any piece of work. I think, though, that if your heart and your spirit is in that work, that will be conveyed to the viewer, and then they can take what they will from it and interpret it in whatever way they see fit. Sometimes I get comments that, oh, that looks demonic or that looks dark, and that's not at all what I see in the piece. But it doesn't bother me that that's what people see. If it perhaps helps them to discover something dark in themselves that they can then purge because that's what they're seeing, well, then that's successful too. And even if they absolutely hate it, at least the work is successful in eliciting some response. It's better than the deadly, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting piece of art. Well, what does that mean? Everything's interesting. Our business, Volcania Graphics and Fine Art, is almost exclusively about providing digital reproduction services for artists of all kinds, oil painters, acrylic painters, watercolor painters, pen and ink artists. Though we haven't done much of it, we'll even do photographs of sculpture and 3D work for portfolios if requested. For website work, any reproduction work we do for an artist, we then also provide them when we give them their master files once they've approved all the color work and the digital reproduction work. Along with that master high-resolution file, we provide a web-ready, smaller-sized file that's good for website use or Facebook use, and those are typically at a resolution that even if somebody swipes it, they can't get much out of it. They aren't going to be able to reproduce it at a size that they're going to want to hang on their wall. At best, they'll get something they can throw up on the refrigerator with a magnet. Other community involvement, as Sean and I were counting up over the last several months, typically on any given month I have work up in at least 4 different venues in the city, and sometimes it goes up to 5 or 6. I have work at Hive Art Space. I've participated in Parliament shows. Just before we moved to York, I was invited by King's Courtyard to be featured artist. So that was kind of my introduction to York, and actually I think Carla and I met there for the first time with my coffee and cream series up on the wall. Brief history. I went to Clemson University where I received a BA in English after starting out as a history major. And it was in the English department that I then was taking an elective course, a one credit elective course called Theater Lab, which was an easy A and a good way to start creeping up that GPA for graduation. So got involved in theater, got my Bachelor of Arts in English, then went to Illinois State University in a graduate theater program, where I concentrated on theater production and more specifically on stage management. Never finished the thesis for that degree, so that's still kind of hanging in the air. But that's okay because it led to a 15 to 20 year career in the theater, which then led to production work with quote unquote industrial work, but primarily in the automotive industry, which ended up being both consumer events and dealer training events for all the major car manufacturers: Toyota, Honda, Ford, Lexus, Infiniti, virtually all of them. Which then through that and our hiking and kayaking started getting back into photography and going to local art shows where we were seeing work out there and thinking, well, gee, my work's as good as some of this. Why am I not doing this for money and for a living? And my partner Sean, who operates Volcania Graphics and Fine Art with me, was a Kinko's trained and self-trained graphic designer. So we figured with the photography and the graphic design backgrounds, we should start our own company, which we then did. And we started out as Walczyk and Young Studios, not very descriptive of what we did. So eventually we changed to Volcania Graphics and Fine Art. We were doing, at that point, more graphic design work and web work for smaller companies. And then with the with the recession and the downturn of the economy, all the smaller companies started pulling that work in-house, and so there was less and less for us to do. We had been doing artist reproduction work sort of as a sideline to the graphic design and ad work that we were doing for companies, and decided, well, the design work is going nowhere, so we should switch gears and specialize exclusively, or almost exclusively, in digital reproduction work for artists, and that's where we are today. When I first got back into photography and digital photography specifically, because my film camera had been stolen, I was adamant about only doing straightforward photography that came straight from the camera and no Photoshop, no nothing. And since we were kayakers and hikers and like being outdoors, I concentrated primarily on nature work, not so much landscapes. I was more after, wildlife and macro and close-ups of details. Then when we started printing and we got our first large format printer, we did an online Epson Print Academy course where you had various videos from the pros doing their own printing, their own photography, and their own printing. And a photographer, Vincent Versace, opened my eyes to going after your vision, even if it meant editing and manipulating the original photograph. Because the point was, what is your vision? It's your art. You make it what you're envisioning. Doesn't have to be exactly what you saw before you. And he was simply filling, I remember the photograph, it was this ivy on this brick wall, and he loved his composition, except he had a huge negative space that was jarring on the right-hand side. So he made a selection and, feathered the edges so it wouldn't be obvious that it was cut and pasted over here. And he just moved a little bit of that ivy over into that space and made it very faint so that there was a little bit of visual interest there to complete his vision of what he really saw, not what was actually there. And that then opened my eyes to exploring the possibilities with Photoshop. And then also it was learning that a camera doesn't see the same way that a human sees. The eye and the brain work together so that our f-stops, if you will, have a greater range than any camera ever will. So you're either going to have to concentrate and get your highlights the way you want them or your shadows the way you want them. You're never going to have both if you've got a high contrast scene. You're never going to get both unless you then post-process that image afterwards. And then from there, once you start allowing yourself to play with the images and post-processing in that way, it opens you up to experimenting with other softwares and plugins for Photoshop software that really allow you to for lack of a better term, torture the pixels and get what you want. So now I work pretty organically. I mean, I pre-vision to a certain extent, or I decide like the bridge abutments or, you know, a building that interests me. I'll just take a photograph of it and then I'll go into Photoshop and I'll just start literally playing, flipping it around and distorting it and stretching it and squeezing it and layering it back on top of itself with these distortions and playing with blending modes so that color shifts and changes and see what happens. And eventually something will start to take shape, and then it's a dialogue between myself and what's there as to where it's going to go and where it's going to finally finish up. So I've evolved from, you know, the more straightforward traditional photography to more highly manipulated and abstract work, or symbolic or conceptual kind of work. And that's all been self-taught and wanting to do something different and not knowing how to do it, and just go in and attack and play and see what happens. I think over the next few years, and I think it's already starting to happen, is having York become a stronger destination for a more diverse and larger buying public, and I think reaching out to larger metropolitan areas and figuring out a way to get those people here to see the wealth of talent that exists here in York. And I think that's already starting to happen. So I would just like to see that continue to grow and expand and have York be, you know, more on the map as it is now, as that cultural destination for all of the arts. God, the music scene here in York, and the poetry and the spoken word and the visual arts and the performing arts. It's just such a rich art area. And everybody's so nice. You don't have that artiste attitude that sometimes goes with larger metropolitan areas, and the eliteness and the aloofness of, oh, this is the arts community. There's, like I said earlier, it's the family feel and the community feel that we're all in it together. And even the retailers participating, you know, the more traditional retailers and gift shops who support and welcome artists into their shops, like with Bloom Art Market, and we already have York Fest, which is a terrific and one of the, I think, probably preeminent arts festivals in the region that happens every year. And York Arts then does the juried show that draws not only local artists but regional and other artists to submit work for that exhibit at York Arts. So it's just such a, I think we're already on our way, and I think it's only going to continue to grow. And you know, for starving artists, it never happens fast enough. You know, you want more buyers, and not only because it's income, but because you know, you're, as much as artists want to say you create for yourself, you want it out there. You want other people. You want to find that audience that enjoys your work and understands your work, because then they're understanding you, and they're understanding you know, that creative impulse that you have to share something with the more immediate community, but then the broader community, the world as a whole. You know, where we stand as human beings and where we're headed.